Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from MIA called AIM. So let me put something forward that I've come to realize with the benefit of some hindsight. Could it be that MIA was never really that great of an artist, even from the very beginning? Yeah, I know, it's a harsh charge to make, especially coming from somebody who's never really been all that fond of MIA, but let me make my case here. Even when she burst onto the scene in the mid-2000s with her eclectic blend of choppy Afrobeat, hip-hop, and raw provocation, I wasn't really much of a fan, but I did get some of the punk appeal. Jagged, explosive, not especially nuanced in her politics, but loaded with enough potent sloganeering that she was kind of hard to ignore. Both Aralar and Kala, they weren't really my thing, but I could appreciate that she had her audience. But then Maya happened, and here's the thing. I've heard a lot of people say that if it were released nowadays, where noise rap is a lot more prevalent, it would have gotten a better reception, but having gotten on board with noise rap in recent years and revisited Maya, it really is as messy, shallow, and migraine-inducing as you probably remember. Just because you're the first of the sound does not mean that you did it best. She followed up in 2013 with Matangi, which was reportedly a lot better, which I actually reviewed in full early on this channel, and in retrospect I might have been entirely too kind to it. I didn't like Maya, but it at least felt like it was trying something unique and new, while Matangi wasn't irritating the piss out of me with its sloppy misunderstandings of technology, politics, social commentary, with some painfully trite writing. It was just tedious, not helped by a laconic delivery which did nothing for any populism or melody that the album was haphazardly trying to create. But going into this reportedly final album for MIA, where even self-professed MIA fans were a little bit reticent, I started to wonder what it was that MIA had left behind here. Of her albums, I'd say only 2 were anything close to good, and while I appreciate the embrace of rougher, noisier, African-inspired textures in hip-hop, MIA was not the only one or the first one to inspire those sorts of sounds, and 50% not a winning or even passing record going into this. So is AIM the album to tip the scales back in her favor? Well, no. But in retrospect, I'm not surprised by that. Forget her public persona and her media antics, I really don't care about that, and if anything, they confirm way too much of what I already suspected in her music. But the public and critical response to AIM has been mixed at best and outright panned at worst. And I can't help but feel a certain amount of vindication as to why. Yeah, I don't like AIM either, but it's not like the problem's here that they aren't on her previous albums either. They're just more visible, to the point where even MIA fans can't really defend this in the same way, especially in comparison with her best work. I'm not gonna say that I told you so, but I am gonna say, what the hell took you all so long? And look, I am gonna apologize right now if this comes across a bit smug. If you liked her previous albums, you've been watching her steady decline with real disappointment, I can feel for that, especially when you get the uneasy impression that she's just lazily strip mining her past accomplishments to compensate for no real ideas. It's most obvious on Visa, where she not only samples her own first single Galang, but also fills it up with references to her previous albums for a bragging track that might actually be one of the better songs on the album simply because it reminds us of better times. Hell, the majority of this album feels like I'm hearing the cliff notes of what MIA has done in the past and frankly done better, with too many songs trailing off after a verse or two with no real finish or anything beyond just a heavily auto-tuned croon for the outro. And for the record, auto-tune is a really bad choice for MIA's vocals. I don't typically like her lazy, borderline capricious drawl that seems barely capable of conveying investment in anything. But when you slap on effects to force things on tune for some sort of melody, the feeling gets even worse that she's investing even less time and effort. And that's before she gets Zayn on Freedom, who is unrecognizable behind a pileup of filters. Or the fact that so many of her own vocal pickups feel so sloppily layered or compressed to the point of peaking. They really don't sound well put together on this album. But that's before we get to the rest of the production on this mess. And here's the thing, it's not really MIA's fault that the rest of the industry, particularly in 2016, likes a lot of tropical sounding, clattering beats with contorting synth lines. For the most part, she was there first, I'll give her that. But you would think that having brought that sound to modern pop and hip-hop, that she'd be able to do more with it than the pale facsimiles of bangers that we get here that we've heard elsewhere this year. I actually don't mind some of the trap snares and synths on Borders, minus the chipmunk vocals of course, which make their infuriating return on Finally. But it also reminds me that I could hear this sort of instrumental dime a dozen on any single week on Billboard Breakdown. Yeah, it's not her fault that DJ Snake basically already made her song go off better a month or so ago when he released his debut album Encore, but again, he's doing it better. Skrillex actually does show up to make the annoyance of AMP all the more palpable on the squonking, pitch-shifted layers, but when I discovered that song was actually a remixed leftover fragment from the Matangi recording sessions, I wasn't even surprised. Again, there are a few tracks here that feel like leftovers from that recording, and that only implies more laziness in this production. What startles me is that in the 3 years since that album, MIA didn't refine some of these songs or make them feel any less unfinished. Jump In is basically a sloppily layered vocal round with a sparse beat, a tactic that shows up later on the more harshly mechanical Fly Pirate, which doesn't so much evolve but fall apart after a verse into this sparse beat. The absolute worst example of this is Birdsong Black Star Remix, which features an overload of kazoos and squawking with this painfully thin guitar trying to carry some sort of groove, where MIA cycles through a list of painfully forced bird references. I guess it's an okay concept, but it's a terrible execution. Now granted, if we were looking at the area where things won't consistently wrong for most of this album, it would be in the lyrics and themes and content. And the list of bad lines, folks. Stay rich like an ostrich? I get the reference, but still sounds wonky. The People's Republic of Swagistan? Creeping around in your socks and slippers while Mexicans say hola? Not very good creeping in my books. A smack against Instagram models on the opening lines of Fly Pirate, when just a few songs earlier you were referencing brand names like Mac on AMP, which operates on the same commercial principle. Granted, if we were looking to open up the file on MIA and hypocrisy, we'd be here all day. But of course, it gets worse when she tries to get more political. Opening song Borders tries to speak on the refugee crisis and how it's getting drowned out in the media saturation, but the topic certainly isn't getting drowned out if you go to any place in Europe where it's placing very real visible strain on the EU, and B, by placing it in juxtaposition with so many other topics, which you even further trivialize the vapid "what's up with that" at the end of each line on the hook. You're doing the exact same thing. It gets even more exasperating on Foreign Friend. I think the song is trying to be ironic, showing how people emigrate to Western nations only to escape oppression, only to find themselves tokenized once they get there. But with Dexta Daps overselling the hook and MIA seeming to play the friendship mostly straight for 3 verses, it feels way too thin and shallow to really connect with that theme. But then again, this is an album that professes its depth, when on the self-esteem anthem Survivors, it epitomizes all of its struggle with a fire emoji. But that highlights the great issues of this album. Even though MIA has admitted that she's not looking to tackle as many heavier political themes as she has before, her repeated references to Lara Croft, especially her modern incarnation in the video games, seems to reinforce that MIA sees herself as a survivor, tirelessly struggling on her own against that system. The problem is that her self-perception is woefully out of touch with modern reality, both on and off record, and nowhere is that more proven than the best song here, Ali, Are You Okay? Now, I'm not wild about the production there. The fast-paced Indian groove, not really my thing, just not really wild about the sound. But it is propulsive, it's got real melody, and it does capture the overworked stress of an immigrant struggling as an Uber driver to provide for his family. And it's relevant because MIA is not writing about herself on the song, and thus builds some real distance to speak from a real underdog perspective. I can emote and get behind this track. This guy actually is a survivor. But again, none of this surprises me. The laconic vocals, the borderline vapid approach to bragging and social commentary, the clattering, choppily layered beats, the pretentiousness. This has been MIA's trademark for years now. If anything, AIM reveals that there's a very fine line to doing it well so that she can deceive everybody else. For me, well, this is an artist who insults somebody's acne and compares herself to Proactive. You know, that sterile, borderline functional product once hawked by Adam Levine and Justin Bieber. You know, for me, she's a lot more like Accutane. Works for some people, but dries everything else up, and for some triggers depression and suicidal thoughts. In other words, I'm giving this a 4 out of 10, no recommendation, and if this is the note that she wants to go out on, I'm sorry, it's a weak one. I'd skip this. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can imagine, like my last MIA review, this album will not go over well, but hey, I got the poll up here. You guys think I'm wrong, just let me know. But even, again, I've heard from some MIA fans, and they weren't entirely wild about this album either. But until then, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.